The Packers and Aaron Rodgers camp engaging in talks. Maybe. All that and more today. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, on the Dynasty Newsletter, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, before we get to all this Aaron Rodgers drama, let's talk about the second round of our mock from draft night.
Yeah, and I think that while it's been a couple of weeks, folks have already been doing their drafts like left and right. I've been seeing so many screenshots or debates about where folks are taking Kyle Pitts and our buddy John Bosch, like talking about some of those trades about people rejecting, just straight up CMC
Christian
for
McCaffrey.
Yes, Christian McCaffrey for Kyle Pitts.
Okay.
Rejected. I cannot for the life of me. It doesn't make much sense to me. But
I
regardless,
had to close Twitter. I couldn't.
Yeah, I had to step away for a second. But the rookie fever is clearly upon us, folks, because that's where we're at right now. We are thinking about landing spots. We're thinking about what could be, like how these players are going to thrive in their situations. And so while this mock, it was a couple weeks ago, it's still for us a good mental exercise to really think through the values of some of these rookies, their landing spots, what their projected workload could be right out the gate, long term, contract situations, rumors surrounding the team. All that becomes a part of how we're looking at these things, especially once we get into the draft and once you're on the clock. So that's what we're going to take a look at tonight. So if you remember back a few weeks ago when we actually did the mock live on, what was that, Saturday night? Was that Friday night or Saturday night? Like when we did that. Regardless, on that during the draft, we ran through that first and second round of the mock. And to start off in the second round, it was Trey Sermon at the 201, Rondale Moore at the 202, and then Terrace Marshall at the 203. Now, given their landing spots, given their projected workload, given their situation within their respective teams, no issue there with how we're valuing each one of those prospects and how we think you should approach them. Because remember, this was a SuperFlex mock that we were doing. So I have no issue with how we're valuing each of those players as of right now. Now, in the 204, 205, 206 range, that's where, not to say we made a mistake, it's just that we're working off incomplete information. As I said, we were doing that draft as of, I think
third round was happening.
Yeah, third round was happening. Michael Carter had not even been drafted. So, folks, as of right now, our mock doesn't even have Michael Carter in the second round. So before people come adding us on Twitter, telling us that we don't know what we're talking about, which is possibly, that's possibly true. Don't get me wrong. But that's where we have gone back and we took a look at it. It's like, yeah, Michael Carter has to be a part of that early to mid second round. So depending on how you look at those players, for me personally, I would probably have Bateman up front, Carter at 5, and then Elijah Moore at 6. That will be my personal preference. But Adam, I'll kick it over to you. I think Michael Carter, regardless of specifically where you put him at, he should be a guy that you should value somewhere in this range in your SuperFlex drafts.
Yeah, I actually have Michael Carter in a tier of his own, and the 5 in front of him are in a tier. So at 112, we had Mac Jones, and we just could not figure out how to put him any higher. Like, we get that it's 2 QB SuperFlex. There's no one that I could move Mac Jones ahead of. So he was our 112. And then the next 5, you can take them in whatever order you want. My order is Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Trey Sermon, Terrace Marshall, Rondale Moore, and then Michael Carter. So I will take all of those 5 in any order before I take Michael Carter, but I think he's got to be the 206. So, and he's moving up a little, and that's always going to happen with running backs that have projected touches. Like I said, I know we have an inside joke with Tevin Coleman, but I do honestly think that he gets the first crack. So I don't think that I don't think Michael Carter is just going to walk into a day one role. And if you do think he walks into a day one role, you better be drafting him before the 206. So yeah. I just don't. I think that all 5 players ahead of him project for day one opportunity and actual roles carved out in their offense.
It is quite interesting, though, that the worlds that we would think are separated are really coming together in the redraft best ball world and the dynasty world. Because If you look at the best ball world, rookies are now becoming a much larger conversation when we're talking about how folks are constructing their rosters, whether it be just for your casual drafts, Best Ball Mania over at Underdog. Go and check out those folks over there and what the craziness that is the best ball tournaments, over $1 million. Go and check that out. But all those guys that you just mentioned, so like the Trey Sermons, like the Michael Carters, those are the guys that are a part of obscure, ambiguous backfields. We do think at some point during the season, whether it's week 1, week 4, week 10, or whatever, that they could become a larger part of their offense, have pass catching ability, or can be a part of the passing game. So it just seems like a no-brainer that you would want to pick up those guys and have them as a part of your best ball portfolio. And that obviously translates into Dynasty or vice versa, where we want to take shots at some of those guys in the second round that if you missed on a Javonte Williams, you missed on a Najee Harris, you missed on a Travis Etienne. These are the guys that you would want to immediately scoop up because you want those young running backs as a part of your roster. Some folks try and look at grabbing older running backs because we know that they're going to start. We know that they're going to put up production for us and keep our wide receivers young. Have older running backs to kind of to supplement the rest of your roster. I get that approach, but if you want to try and churn your roster and keep some of those backs fresh, guys like Michael Carter, guys like Trey Sermon that could be a part of that are available towards the back end of your first round, even Chubba Hubbard. We'll talk about him towards the back of this round. Those are the guys that you want to be trying to tack on to the middle to back end of the second round so that you do have a full complement of running backs. Not just the older guys, the established vets, but some of the younger guys that could also wind up providing production, if not in year 1, but over the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, I want to touch on something you just mentioned. When you miss on Javonte and you miss on Etienne and you miss on Harris, you get FOMO, and that's how these guys like Trey Sermon and Michael Carter every year get pushed up, because if you squint hard enough, you can see that those guys may get touches, may get opportunity. Now, Trey Sermon's a little bit different story because just the offense he's in, if he's getting any opportunity at all, let's put his touches on a premium is probably the best way to look at it. Michael Carter shared the backfield with Javonte Williams. He was a fine prospect in his own right, but Trey Sermon was head and shoulders above him the whole rookie process, in my opinion. And the only reason that Carter is being drafted at the 206 where he is because, one, you're starting to get in the dart throwing territory. Like I said, I like the 5 in front of him. After that, I don't particularly like any prospect more, like I said, head and shoulders than the others. So yes, take somebody who projects to get some touches. But I just want to point out that just because you missed on Etienne and Javonte and Najee does not make Trey Sermon or Michael Carter any better prospects. I know it feels that way. I just did the same thing the other day. I traded out of Javonte in a team that I was terrible. And this is something you can do as well. If you feel like Trey Sermon brings you similar potential, hey, Javante's not going to get a whole ton of touches in year 1 either. Yet in best ball, I got Melvin Gordon 6 rounds after I got after somebody took Javonte, so Javante's not going to have this whole crazy workload either, yet he's being drafted at 109, 108, and you're getting Trey Sermon between 201 and 204. So I get it. So if you need assets like I did, trade back, grab, in my case, I think I grabbed Elijah Moore and Trey Sermon. That's fine. That's fine, because if you squint hard enough, he is Javonte Williams. And if you squint hard enough, yeah, okay, Michael Carter maybe is Javonte Williams too, because they shared the backfield together. In fact, Michael Carter had similar involvement in that North Carolina backfield. So it's two sides to the coin, and especially if you have team needs and you missed on running back, then maybe the allure is there. But I just want to point out that 5 that I mentioned at the beginning of the show is don't put Michael Carter in that tier just because you feel like you need a running back and you squinted too hard.
It is kind of funny, though, that the FOMO that occurs in most rookie drafts, it typically comes at the running back position, but that's because it's the position that has so much scarcity, right? Because we only have so many that get the draft capital we need, only so many that wind up in the situations that could at least produce fantasy output at some point in either their immediate or near future. So I wholeheartedly agree with Adam. There's a situation where even for a guy like Trey Sermon, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, I mean, they
Wayne
continue to,
Gallman, it goes
Wayne
on and
Gallman.
on.
I mean, they continue to stay healthy. They continue to produce. The offense clicks. There's no need to quote unquote unleash Trey Sermon at all in year one. Or maybe there's a narrative that comes out that they're saving him for the playoffs, something like that. And he has almost no value in his rookie season. Heck, LaMichael P. Ryan, Tevin Coleman, they can wind up, clicking on flipping the light switch and finding the fountain of youth, and they continue to produce. And we see Michael Carter kind of sit behind, maybe work in on a few pass downs here and there, and he doesn't find his path to production. Christian McCaffrey returns to 2019 Christian McCaffrey, 0 snaps for Chubba Hubbard. I mean, these are all within the realm of possibility. So it's balancing the value of their perceived value with what could actually happen, and then also the opportunity cost for the other wide receivers or tight ends that might be going around that same time frame. Because as we move on to the next few in this draft, so 207, 208, 209. I mean, there we had Amari Rodgers, Pat Freiermuth, the other tight end, and then De'Ami Brown also after that. I mean, if any of those guys, if we're talking about Chubba Hubbard being overdrafted and being taken ahead of some of those wide receivers, that's where we're seeing that's a possibility in terms of that, fear of missing out that other drafters might have, and where you can capitalize on that sort of situation. Because in my mind, I would like Freiermuth for sure, Amari Rodgers for sure, Brown for sure, over what we think Hubbard could do. I still think that those guys will be wide receivers that I would target there at that point.
Yeah, and we talk about with Kyle Pitts that if some people say that if he doesn't hit this year, that with all the hypes he's got, you're going to be able to buy him next year. I don't believe that's the case, especially in this instance with Kyle Pitts, but just tight ends in general. If you're playing with anybody that's even generally savvy in Dynasty, they know rookie tight ends. They're not new to this game. They're going to be upset that their next coming of Tony Gonzalez isn't here already, but they're not ready to move on from him after year one. However, if there is a position that does do that, it's running back. And if Trey Sermon or Michael Carter or Chubba Hubbard don't produce in year one at all, they're relegated to throw-ins next year.
Right.
So that's just another thing to consider. And hey, you're in dart throwing range. Perhaps not with Sermon. If you're taking Trey Sermon at 201 and you've got 5 guys around him that I really like, you're not in dart throwing range yet. But that's why I like Michael Carter right after that tier at 206. If you're going to start throwing darts, yes, throw it at somebody who could be a starting running back. And if he doesn't, okay, whatever. He's a throw-in. Missed on my 206, darn. Or Chubba doesn't get any touches at all. Okay, I missed on my 212, whatever. So that's the risk and reward you take there. And maybe if you want to get out of prime pick territory, you're not comfortable taking Trey Sermon where there's 4 other wide receivers around him that you love. Go ahead and trade back, grab the fourth of that tier, your Rondale Moore, and then grab Michael Carter. So maybe you trade your 201 for the 205 and the 206, still get a player in that tier, and then you get to add your shot with Michael Carter and feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, so there are a number of ways to try and make sure that you're maintaining or equalizing the value of your picks without focusing in on the player themselves. While Adam and I have just stated, there are players that we like more so than others, but we're still trying to equalize that with the value of whichever pick that or wherever we're having them ranked within the second round of this draft. And so to round out the draft, I think previously we had Anthony Schwartz, Dwayne Eskridge, and Trey McKinney at the back end of the second round. Yeah, that's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, they were literally just the 22nd.
We were just thinking about it
guys.
I think it was on Friday night when we did it.
And
that's not going to work, folks. But now after talking about it and obviously putting some common sense to it, we've got Kadarius Toney, De'Ami Brown, and then Chubba Hubbard to round out the draft. Now, the one thing that stuck out in my mind as we looked at the back end of this draft is, how far a wide receiver that a team traded up to get in the first. Kadarius Toney lingering towards the back end of second rounds.
I know.
It's bizarre, and that could be one of those talking points for a lot of leagues, in that where do you then have to accept the fact that this is how the team wants to value that wide receiver? how they could wind up using him almost out the gate. Maybe they possibly are signaling that they're not happy with the wide receiver group that they currently have, and he could wind up playing earlier rather than later, despite how we feel about Sterling Shepard or even Darius Slayton to some degree. I think he takes more of like Shep's role than anything else, but it's just at what point, I mean, we're talking about him now at what, the
209 or 210,
209, 210. And so to think that a wide receiver with early round draft capital can be available at the back end of the second, it's a head scratcher for me, because it's almost like that's not a way, or it's not a result, I would think, with the process that we've typically talked about in years past. But if now we have to reconcile that with the offense that he's a part of, I don't know how I could push him higher at this point. But hopefully I'd be able to get some time in and think about it before I had to make that selection.
Well, I guess I have to go on my Kadarius Toney rant now, because it's this is going to be a Sigmund Bloom rant taking you down narrative street, because there's teams that signal in a positive way and there's teams that signal in a negative way. If you tell me that Dave Gettleman traded up to draft this wide receiver, it doesn't change the needle for me. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that I'm would be a better GM than Dave Gettleman, but I'm saying he's probably the worst GM to get your signaling from. So that doesn't move the needle much for me. I feel comfortable in my dynasty foresight. I'm not worried about his year one production. What I am worried about is you gave Sterling Shepard a contract. You got Darius Slayton for 2, maybe 3 more years. You just got Kenny Golladay for 4 years. If you're upset with any part of your offense, it's your tight end. Kadarius Toney's not a tight end. So now you're looking at 3 players in front of him for not just his first year, for multiple years. And then you have Saquon Barkley coming back that's going to mix everything up, because you didn't see Saquon Barkley in this passing game last year. So potentially the 5th option, well, I mean, we're drafting Amon-Ra Brown right around there, potentially the 3rd option in a pass, what I hope is a pass-happy offense. You've got Amon-Ra St.Brown, 3rd option, probably better than the 3rd option, because Tyrell Williams or Brashard Perriman are not going to stay healthy, just given their history. So, I mean, is it that crazy? Because you can't point to anything except for Dave Gettleman traded up for him. Now, there's one more factor there. Well, the Jags would have taken him. Okay, how good am I feeling about Urban Meyer right now? You know? So, like, okay, the worst team for signaling took him. The second worst team for signaling said they would have took him. Great. You know? So, I mean, prove me wrong, but maybe he's better for the NFL program that he's going to be for a fantasy team. Maybe he's running these gadget things. Maybe he's making the defense play honest. Maybe he's their jet sweep guy. I don't know. He's going to see the field. He got drafted so early. He has to see the field. I just don't understand how, in what capacity. I have no information besides Dave Gettleman felt like he had to trade up to get him.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I fall with that. I mean, draft capital aside, he winds up in a situation where he has at least a high level of competition for targets with the other guys that are around him. He's attached to what we think to be an erratic quarterback. We don't really know what type of quarterback Daniel Jones can be. Decent his rookie season, at least for fantasy. Took a step back in 2020. Could take a step forward in 2021. We don't know. But either way, attached to a scattershot quarterback that's piloted by as the offensive coordinator
in coordinator in the league,
and Jason Garrett. So if you need a creative coordinator to unlock the potential of Kadarius, you could not have asked for a worse person to be attached to.
Imagine if Kadarius Toney went to San Francisco or the Rams instead of Tutu Atwell. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I mean, that's 3 things already that I've listed right off the top, that it's hard for me to see, like, despite the 1st round draft capital, how he can retain that type of value based, at least compared to the other guys that we've listed. The guys that we know that even though their situation might not be as great, or at least their offensive situation might not be as great, but we can see work for Amon-Ra St. Brown. We can see work for Amon-Ra Brown. almost out the gate. Diami, maybe not so much. I mean, we were talking earlier about the other wide receivers that are still currently on there. So it might take some roster cuts in order for us to visualize his path to success. But for Toney, it's even worse. So I don't see how moving him up just based off draft capital makes a ton of sense. Because if you look at his offensive situation, you look at what's there, like what type of offense he's attached to, the offensive coordinator. It just, to me, does not scream value, regardless of what the draft capital associated with him is. So to round out our second round of our mock draft, so we've got Moore, Bateman, Sermon right off the rip. Futz around with that if you want to. I mean, move Servant up or whatever if you want to. Marshall, Moore, Carter as your next three. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Freiermuth, Amari afterwards. Kadarius Toney, Dyami Brown, Chubba Hubbard to round out the back end of our second round of our mock draft. Superflex makes sense to me, but definitely let us know what you think about it. I mean, drop us a comment. I'm here for the debates. I mean, I really do think that as we start to think about the value of these guys, it's what makes us better evaluators. I mean, not draft evaluators. Obviously, we're not going to the combine or anything like that, but just, I mean, draft evaluators. I mean, fantasy draft evaluators, thinking about how this affects both our dynasty rosters. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, if we're talking about production out of year one, that would impact our redraft valuation of these players. It would impact our best ball valuation of some of these players. So take a look at it. Head on down to the Football Guys Network on our YouTube channel, footballguys.com. Our show, Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, Cecil, Sig doing all of the recaps. The 2 Point Stance now with Dave Kluge and Lauren Carpenter. I mean, take a look at all of the content that we've been putting out over the next week. Let us know what you think. Subscribe, like, yell at us in the comments if you want to. Do what you got to do. But we appreciate you guys coming out and taking a look at it. So transitioning over to what the actual, I guess, the meat of what this show is going to be moving forward. I mean, it is, I mean, across the top. I mean, you guys see it up here, Dynasty Newsletter. I mean, that's the whole point. Now, Joe Bryant, wonderful man. Go talk to the guy about barbecue anytime. But he puts out his newsletter almost on a daily basis, right?
Yep, daily newsletter.
Yeah, daily basis, chock full of information. Our job here is to take the news segments that are part of his newsletter and then give you the dynasty takes on each of those. So Adam's going to kick us off real quick with some of the news out of that's been coming over the past few days. We'll see what the impact or from a dynasty perspective is going to be. And then we'll see what kind of actionable advice we can provide to you. So that sounds good to you, Adam. I mean, what we got going on?
So we started the show with a bomb. And if you want to hear all about this bomb, go listen to the episode with Cecil Lammy on the Audible. I believe 2 episodes now, maybe 1. I'll put the link in this episode somewhere around here that you'll be able to click and go back and listen to the detailed analysis. Now, the last analysis from Cecil on that episode was that the Broncos might actually get Aaron Rodgers. But what just came out, and I was prepared to talk about the Broncos might actually get Aaron Rodgers until I'm putting my notes together from the newsletter, and I see Packers and Rodgers camps engaging in talks. Now, if you look more into it, it doesn't mean that Rodgers camp is super happy about talking to them. That means that they picked up the phone because apparently the Packers sent a pretty lucrative long-term contract. Now, that doesn't mean much if you look through the tea leaves because next day could just be Aaron Rodgers says no. I think the point kind of is he doesn't want that. So you can send him all the money you want, but if he doesn't want to stay there, he's not gonna. So what do you think about the Packers debacle and what are you doing? Is there a way to capitalize on this mess?
I don't know if there's really a way to capitalize on this mess because we're already looking at a quarterback that, I mean, if he wanted to continue to play into his 40s, I don't think most folks would try and stop him. But from a dynasty perspective, that's not really the quarterback that a lot of folks would want to try and invest in. Superflex, if you want to hold it, if you already had him, you're holding him as your QB2, like most likely anyway. But trading for him at this point, I don't think that's the worst idea. Yeah, I mean, just given the situation that he could find himself in if he were to land in Denver. I mean, on paper, I mean, let's set aside like the defense on paper. I mean, they overhauled their cornerback situation. Their front looks absolutely they get Chubb. They
About
get
as good as it's always been. Yeah.
Chubb
It's
healthy,
incredible.
Von Miller. The bookends for that. I think it's going to be excellent. So, but on the offense, even better. Cortland Sutton coming back from injury. Jerry Jeudy, hopefully he fixes the drops. I don't care about. Maybe stay
Yeah.
off Twitter. Maybe stay off social media for a little bit.
Mhm.
But either way, I think having them as your primary wide receivers. Noah Fant, obviously his athleticism is one of those things that we would want to see out of our tight ends. Currently going as, I want to say, the tight end 5-6, like somewhere in that range from a best ball perspective. The offense on paper, and we already talked about the running back situation earlier when we talked about the second about the mock. So on paper, this is a fairly powerful offense that I wouldn't mind investing in. From a startup perspective, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy they were going back to back in ADP, wide receivers 28 and 29 in startup drafts. So if those were the guys that folks were kind of down on because they're thinking another year of Drew Lock,
right.
They bring in Teddy, okay, fine, ho hum, but now the prospect of Aaron Rodgers coming in, completely taking over that quarterback room. If you weren't already trying to capitalize on the rumor that Aaron Rodgers might be a part of the squad, I would go ahead, and I already thought that Sutton and Jeudy were already fairly decent prospects to begin with. But now you add in a good quarterback. Hey, that's almost triple Yahtzee at that point. So I would think that those are guys that you would want to try and pick up as soon as you can.
We're in a strange situation where you're probably paying extra for Broncos guys just because last year's MVP may come there. But that doesn't mean the perspective on Aaron Rodgers is not negative right now. If people have him in Dynasty, it's going to vary from owner to owner, but they could be thinking 38 years old, about to go to a new team. If he doesn't go to a new team, he's in a toxic situation. And with the Packers, he might retire. The word retire being said could decrease his value right there. There's a lot of quarterbacks that are going right behind him that you just simply bump ahead just because he said the term retirement. So I don't think it's a bad idea to reach out and see what Aaron Rodgers owners want for him, because if he goes to the Broncos, yeah, like you mentioned, for one, there's no incubation period with Aaron Rodgers. He's Aaron Rodgers week one. Week one, you're going to get what you got from him last year. It's just the kind of player he is. In my opinion, he's the best quarterback that's ever played. Now, Tom Brady's the winningest quarterback that's ever played, and we can have this conversation forever. But
somebody's going to be in your mentions about that dude for real.
Aaron Rodgers is going to have no problem if he goes to the Broncos. So that being said, in SuperFlex, just like you mentioned, having last year's MVP as your quarterback too, and probably going to play at an MVP caliber again, regardless of what team he plays for. We're seeing Tom Brady playing at an MVP caliber at 42, right? Going into age 42. And I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be producing less than Tom Brady. From a physical perspective, Aaron Rodgers is head and shoulders above Tom Brady when he was 38. So I'm just saying, you get an opportunity here for a little buy low window on a player who could potentially be a top 5 quarterback for the next 4 years for you. You're probably not going to get that opportunity again. Any clarity at all, and you're not going to get that opportunity again.
Right. So just taking a quick look at how some of the scoring ended up for some of the wide receivers in Denver last season. So Jerry Jeudy finished as the wide receiver 45, despite, I think he missed a couple games, if I'm not mistaken. Tim Patrick as the wide receiver 44, and then Cortland Sutton much farther down, obviously because he missed most of the season due to his knee injury. Denver was 28th in offensive yards per drive, according to Football Outsiders. You tack on Aaron Rodgers to that offense, you get a little bit of offensive recoil in bringing up their efficiency on a yards per drive basis. If Jerry Jeudy, if the floor is essentially a wide receiver 3-4 for Jerry Jeudy, you add Aaron Rodgers to the mix, sky's the limit after that, in my eyes.
And we failed to mention Deshaun Hamilton, or sorry, not Deshaun Hamilton. He might actually get cut. KJ Hamler is the exact type of player that Aaron Rodgers needs in an Aaron Rodgers offense. So second round draft capital as well.
Yeah, actually, to be quite honest, you would think that he would be the one that, if I'm thinking about it, he'd be the one I want to try and target in trades, because everybody's going to be focused on Cortland Sutton. Everybody's going to be focused on Jerry Jeudy. But KJ Hamler, man, I think he would be a guy that would obviously also benefit from such a thing, because everybody's focused on the big name pieces of that offense, from Fant to Jerry to Sutton. So let me get the guy that will also see an incremental boost in their outlook for the season, and if not for at least the next 2-3 years of dynasty production, and a guy like KJ Hamler who can pop off for 120 and a touch on a weekly basis.
And to be completely honest, KJ Hamler could be a selling point for Aaron Rodgers that people aren't considering whatsoever, because that's the type of receiver that Aaron Rodgers always has. I mean, he's had his struggles with MVS, but that's who he needs MVS to be. And so you get KJ Hamler. I mean, that's something that we don't think about, but as an NFL quarterback, when you have that type of bread and butter player that you need, and you've had struggles with the MVS, I'm not saying that KJ Hamler is not going to have his struggles as well. He's probably not much better caliber of player than MVS, but sometimes the grass is greener on the other side. And that's also something that Aaron Rodgers may be considering, because with it, you said you don't really care about drops, and I agree. Drops are, you could have 10 one year and none for the next 10 years. But either way, Aaron Rodgers is the type of player that gets frustrated, and he's been very frustrated with Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking about drops, I mean, we can think about what Davante Adams was looking like during his first couple of seasons, like playing with Aaron Rodgers
all the time. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was harping on Adams for the drops, and he completely turned a corner, became one of the best wide receivers in the league. But let's talk about his situation for a second. So Aaron Rodgers leaves. He's now stuck with Jordan Love, Blake Bortles, possibly, according to the news today. I mean, he already has come out and said that he might have to think about things if Aaron Rodgers were to bounce, because he's also in a contract year. But do we think that, so let's say Aaron Rodgers leaves, Davante Adams is left with, this gaggle of quarterbacks that, we don't really care too much about. How much does he fall for you if that were to happen? Is Aaron Rodgers so important to his value that we can't even consider him a wide receiver 1 anymore? Because to me, I can't do that. I have to drop him some, but I can't drop him that far.
He'd have to drop from the wide receiver 1 to outside of wide receiver 1 for, if that's what you're going to do with him. So I wouldn't take it that far, because you're still going to have your bread and butter Packers offense, which is passing game goes to Devontae, running game goes to Aaron Jones. And so regardless of who's quarterback, that volume is going to have to be there. I mean, you're not going to get too terribly much production out of Allen Lazard and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So the production's still going to be there. His value is going to take a hit, and it's probably going to be a buying opportunity. But this is always the thing with those 28, 29-year-old wide receivers that are elite, especially when they're at wide receiver 1. It only takes a tiny, tiny nick to their armor to kick them all the way to 5. And Michael Thomas is a perfect example of that. He had his season as wide receiver 1, no matter what.
The wide receiver 1.
The wide receiver 1. He's just a knight in shining armor. He has an injured year, and then he gets time away from Drew Brees. And now we're looking at like wide receiver 8. And when they get to that age, it just takes one nick in their armor, and they're not coming back up. DeAndre Hopkins is another example. He's still going to get 140 targets this year, and it's just not enough to overcome seeing a 28 or a 29 next to that player's name. So if you have Davante Adams, you can expect a value decline no matter what. And if Aaron Rodgers stays there and somehow passes all this up, I promise you Davante Adams' value is not going to go back up. That happens in Dynasty. I mean, people want any reason they can. Now, before there was this nick in his armor with the Aaron Rodgers news, he was Davante Adams. He's going to catch 3 touchdowns a game. He's going to get 12 catches a game. But you hear rumors about Aaron Rodgers, and now he's like wide receiver 4. And like I said, if everything's hunky-dory with Aaron Rodgers, I'll just keep him at wide receiver 4. So, if you can see through that and you can put your blinders on, and Aaron Rodgers does somehow come back happy, you're probably going to get a nice little discount on Davante Adams.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I can't reconcile in my head when it comes to this Davante Adams conversation, is that while I understand Aaron Rodgers is essentially the engine, like for that offense, I mean, it's what helps him like matriculate down the field, score touchdowns, blah, blah, blah. But if Aaron Rodgers is so important to Devontae Adams, to his value, I mean, how bad of a wide receiver is Devontae Adams then? You see what I'm saying? Because like if rumors of him leaving, I mean, just rumors, all right, contract hasn't been signed to our knowledge. But if rumors of him leaving already have us thinking less of Devontae Adams, I mean, where does Devontae Adams rank for some folks in terms of wide receivers? I mean, Allen Robinson, who has been the poster boy for bad quarterback play throughout his entire season. I mean, do folks have Allen Robinson ranked ahead of Devontae Adams? I do not. I think Devontae Adams does. Right, but it's just
I see the point.
But that's the comparison to make, because Allen Robinson has been great regardless of quarterback, but we can't seem to think the same about one of the best wide receivers in the league. So it's just, to me, I'm having trouble figuring out how can we make these things like make it make sense to me. And it
but Allen Robinson has been perennially top 10, and he's never valued inside the top 10. And now he's playing with the best quarterback of his career, and people are just not willing to move him up. So, yeah, I mean, you can be a really good wide receiver. You can produce really well, and the stink of bad quarterback play just will not come off you. So, yeah. I mean, it's not going to matter. Devontae Adams is probably going to fall into that 6 or 7 wide receiver 6 or 7 range, and still probably be the wide receiver 1 overall next year in production.
And it's just going to make me mad. Whatever. All right. So moving on, what do we got for running backs? I mean, where are we at with them?
Well, actually, we've got similar to a running back next. Just really quick, Tim Tebow may or may not be signing with Jacksonville. I'm just obligated to say that, in that you don't have to add him in Dynasty. We do have news about Chubba Hubbard. It's a solid bet to back up CMC by week 1. I hadn't really considered that, to be quite honest with you, but there's no competition to note, and he probably will be the running back 2 for the Carolina Panthers week 1, which, as we were discussing earlier, is a highly, highly coveted position, because he is probably the most valuable backup in the league, if that is the case.
Yeah.
To a player that I wouldn't call Christian McCaffrey injury prone. He's just had serious injury.
Yeah, and I don't know. I would say, to me, the most valuable backup is Tony Pollard.
Fair. And what we said before the show is that if Tony Pollard or Alexander Mattison were, available, so some rookie drafts, free agents are available too. If Tony Pollard and Alexander Mattison in a shallow dynasty league were available, they would both also be around the 212.
Right.
So that's where you're going to take your chance on a very highly coveted backup. And he is going to have a long NFL career, in my opinion. He's not going to do anything great, but he's one of those hard chargers, keeps the legs churning, falls forward, gets those tough yards. Sometimes that's all you need to stick around in the NFL. Look at Frank Gore. Next, we have one that doesn't matter this year, but it will matter eventually. Blaine Gabbert re-signs with the Bucs and will battle for the QB2 spot with Ryan Griffin and Kyle Trask. Now, the thing about that is somebody's going to have to go to the practice squad, and it's not going to be Kyle Trask, because he's going to get claimed almost immediately by almost any other team in the league, because he's a second-round quarterback. So someone's going to get dropped between Gabbert and Ryan Griffin. But I think the thing here is, shouldn't Trask just beat them out, to be quite honest with you?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I don't see how that doesn't happen, to be quite honest.
Or we're concerned, right? I mean, because we didn't get to talk about it because we didn't do the third round, but Kellen Mond, Kyle Trask, and Patty Mills would be the next 3 probably. I would take a shot on any of the 3 of them, given their team situation and draft capital at the front of the third. So if we're taking Kyle Trask as our next tier of quarterbacks, he should probably be able to beat out Blaine Gabbert and Ryan Griffin off the bat, especially since it puts the team in a bind to have to keep either of them.
Yeah, I would almost expect that to be the case. So from a dynasty perspective, since we didn't get into the third round, guys like, I think, Trask, Kellen Mond, I'd put Trask ahead of Mond, just given their situations. But Trask would be one of my ideal targets in the early part of the third round in a superflex draft.
Yep. So I guess they're just going to see what they have in Trask before making the decision, and I would imagine they just outright drop one of Blaine Gabbert and Ryan Griffin, and then maybe the other one just is maybe they dress 3 for part of the year, and then they figure out what they have in Kyle Trask, if he can step in or not.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Next, we have Amon-Ra St.Brown. Could see early work in the slot. Talked about that earlier. I couldn't imagine him not seeing early work, right?
Oh, yeah. So who is it? Ray Agnew, former, let's see. Let me make sure that I'm doing this correctly. So Ray Agnew he was the formal, now he's the assistant GM to Detroit, but he was also the director of pro personnel for the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes over from LA, drafts a guy like Amon-Ra St.Brown, who Matt Harmon, noted wide receiver specialist, has made some comparisons to Cooper Kupp in the way that he can work the slot. So it just seems like, and also that we already have Jared Goff there installed as the quarterback. So it seems like a lot of things are falling into place for a guy like Amon-Ra St.Brown to see the field early and often and work in one of the most coveted positions for a quarterback like Jared Goff. So I definitely,
Jared Goff's Spinky.
Yeah, so I definitely like the fit. Like while I'm still hopeful for guys like Rashad Perryman, because as we've seen him bounce around the league, he's put up decent numbers like where he's been at. I'm still hopeful he does well, but I think Amon-Ra, he's the one that's going to wind up benefiting the most from having Jared Goff as his quarterback.
Yeah, and it shouldn't really even matter if Tyrell Williams or Rashad Perriman stay healthy. I kind of mentioned that earlier. He's going to get the work regardless. If both play all 16 games, you should still see Amon-Ra St.Brown be probably an every down player. I'd imagine he would be. And, he's got slot competition in TJ Hawkinson, who's going to play a lot of slot in his own right. However, you should see Amon-Ra St.Brown, in the mid to late second round, and you're going to get an every down player out of that pick. That's pretty incredible. So I don't know. I think I kind of need to move him up a little bit. Probably to 207. Is that where we had him, or did we have him at 208?
I think it was 207, 208, like one of those two.
And do we look silly for not taking him ahead of Michael Carter? Like, does it's starting to feel like he needs to be in that big tier I talked about before Michael Carter, to be honest with you?
It's entirely possible, but I think I don't want to talk myself into it just by thinking of what it could be. But it makes some sense to have him in that area. But I'd have to think on it a bit more, because if you think about if you think about Detroit's draft, right? So they start off with so they get Sewell, so boost their offensive line, and we know that with Jared Goff, his splits when rushed, or when he's rushed or not, I mean, they're just completely erratic. So if he has time to work the pocket, we can see some benefit to that. I think their offensive line, passing stat, or their offensive grades, from last season, average to below average. So this should be the boost that should keep Jared Goff upright. Right. So hopefully that produces, or at least it's conducive to a situation where Jared Goff can even get the ball out to somebody like Amon-Ra St.Brown. But I think overall, he winds up in that situation that you would want for fantasy purposes, because there's really no competition. If I'm thinking about this correctly, I mean, who else is going to challenge him for snaps at this point? I can't think of another wide receiver.
Danny Amendola's gone.
Yeah, Danny Amendola's gone. What they bring in Khalif Raymond from Tennessee in free agency.
Yep.
So okay, fine. Other than that, Quintez Cephas, anybody?
Not for worried about the slot role.
No, exactly. So it seems like there's just a clear path for him to see work almost right off the bat, unless something were to happen in camp, or he's just, the coaches don't feel that he's ready or something along those lines. But from right here today on the 12th of May, I see nothing but production for Amon-Ra St.Brown, right out the gate.
And he's still got to be a productive NFL talent. He was not an early pick at all. I think 4th round. So it's, he still has to be able to play, but he's the only person standing in his own way in that, right? Last note for today: Rondale Moore set to get the ball in as many ways as possible, according to Cliff Kingsbury. I like that because I know that he's not a gadget guy, and so that means he's going to be a gadget guy plus, because he's already, just because he's 5'7", he's not Tavon Austin, not at all. If you put on the tape, you don't see Tavon Austin. You don't even see 5'7". I mean, he plays way bigger than 5'7". If somebody didn't tell you he was 5'7", you would guess that he's 6'1". So I'm not worried about him just being a gadget. So where this would worry me if it's Tutu Atwell, like, yeah, duh. You're going to get the ball in as many ways as possible, because how else are you going to get him the ball? But if I know that Rondale Moore is going to see his standard rookie working in receiving stats, and then also get the extra 2 to 3 jet sweeps a game, touches out of the backfield, I really like that, especially with a nose for the end zone. This is coach speak that I'll get excited about. You got to get excited about some of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for as many months as we were calling Kingsbury a fake sharp for not really getting Christian Kirk like moved back into the slot where we know that he could produce more. Rest in peace, Andy Isabella, and continue to trot out Larry Fitz. Even though, I mean, all deference to the future Hall of Famer, but it's just we knew that there was better talent like there on the roster.
I felt like that was kind of part of the problem, though, in my opinion. I mean,
but then they signed AJ Green, so it's like they're not fixing the problem. They're still bringing in older wide receivers to take away from their younger talent that we know has more, that they have more juice in them. So it's like it's what is this? That I don't know if he's gonna like trot out the same type of offense as he did in previous years, and we're just left holding the bag of excitement, thinking that, oh yeah, I mean, we've got DeAndre Hopkins, we've got Christian Kirk, now we've got Rondale, and he's not going to use any of them. It's just going to be AJ Green, like running out there all the time, which again, anybody that thinks I'm throwing shade at AJ Green, go check out my profile picture.
So I felt like Larry Fitzgerald was kind of a detriment actually last season, because how do you, as Cliff Kingsbury, come in and tell Larry Fitzgerald, look, I got to get, and he should have. I'm not saying like he's getting paid to make these decisions, but it is hard to go say, look, I got to get Christian Kirk in the slot. You're not cutting it, Larry Fitzgerald. Hey, okay, he was a rookie head coach. It's kind of, I guess you kind of get a pass. Although he's getting paid to do that, he should have done that. But Rondale Moore is definitely a redo to Andy Isabella, I'd imagine. I don't know that Andy Isabella even needs to make the team at this point.
Maybe, I don't know. I just my concern is with all of the with all the fantasy juice that goes into that offense being so much associated with the air raid. They're bottom 5, bottom 10 in neutral passing rate, red zone passing rate. I mean, Kyler Murray was second or third in, I think, or maybe he might have been first in quarterback touchdowns, like right behind Cam, or right in front of Cam rather. So it's like so much of the touchdown equity is wrapped up in their quarterback that where does that production flow out to the receivers other than DeAndre Hopkins? We couldn't rely on Christian Kirk except for a random, what was it, like a Thursday night game?
Some showdown games. Yep.
Yeah, some showdown game or something like that. I mean, Andy Isabella popped off for like 70 and a touch, like one time.
Yeah. Actually, I think he had like a 90-some yarder.
Yeah.
But
either way, it's like, while we're excited for more, it's like I still have that concern that with Cliff in charge, we're just going to still continue to see this ho-hum offense where most of the onus is on Kyler Murray to get things done on his legs, or to just DeAndre Hopkins and maybe a smattering of the other wide receivers. So I just have my concerns about Cliff.
But to be fair, that's kind of baked into his price, because if Rondale Moore were for one a little bit larger, even though, like I said, same premise with Devonta Smith. If you can show me where it matters that he's so small, we'll talk about the BMI. Same thing with Rondale Moore. No, he's playing with anybody. So that's baked into his price that he's small. It's also baked into his price that he's in a crowded wide receiver room. It's all baked into his price. The fact that he's the 5th player in that large tier of 5 to start the second, it's kind of already baked into his price. So, I mean, if you looked at the player on film and then you say, wait, I'm getting him at 205, don't tell me anything about Rondale Moore. Let's just look at his production when he was on the field and watch some of his tape. You're going to be thrilled that you got him at 205. So when you get him at 205 with everything factored in, okay, yeah, it's fair. It's fair, and he should definitely be one pick before Michael Carter, in my opinion. That's all fair to say.
Yeah, I don't hate it. It's just thinking about it's kind of injecting past tendencies into what could be a part of the future, which in some cases it works out. In other cases, you wind up with a team that starts to shift in the proper direction, and they wind up giving you the fantasy production that if you make the assumption of rational coaching, it could possibly happen. So if we want to assume that Cliff Kingsbury sees these young athletic wide receivers, these speedsters that can work from both the perimeter in Hopkins and also from the interior, like Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, and utilize them in order to take pressure off of, while Kyler Murray can be a rushing quarterback, he doesn't have to be a rushing quarterback. So it's just, if you think about all those pieces that are part of the offense, you think that you want to use them more, but it's just hoping that they get to that point where we're starting to see them deployed as we would think they would be, given their skill sets, given the way that that offense was predicated on that air raid offense, the air raid concepts, and then we can start to see that translate into fantasy production that we can then start to use in our rosters. So I'm hoping that becomes more the case here in 2021.
Absolutely. And speaking of Elijah Moore and Rondale Moore, if you want to win more, head on over to footballguys.com. Look for the orange button, the early bird special. Go ahead and subscribe. Get yourself a discount. Let us do the work. You do the winning. So this is what our show is going to look like going forward. The Dynasty Newsletter, we're going to be based directly off Joe Bryant's email subscription that he sends out every day. So make sure you go over to footballguys.com, subscribe to the email newsletter, and we're just plucking out anything that's Dynasty relevant from there. If we have to tell you that Tim Tebow is not rosterable, we will. Whatever we feel like. If you are in an 80-player league, we're probably going to touch on somebody that you need to worry about. So make sure that you're following that. Subscribe over there to that newsletter and check in with us to see at the end of the week, okay, well, I read the newsletter all week. What's that mean for my Dynasty team? Well, we're going to tell you. So do you have anything else for us today, Chris?
I think that's it. Subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. Come follow us on Twitter. Ask us questions if you need us. We'll be here. But other than that, I mean, appreciate sitting down and getting a chance to talk with you again, Adam. And I mean, we'll talk with all the rest of the folks next week.
All right. Appreciate y'all coming out. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.